is Nico Iamaleava getting worse? So is Nico getting worse throughout this season, or is he just playing tougher competition? What does John Adams think?
Well, the last 3 games, he certainly played tougher competition than the first 3 games. However, just looking at those 3 games, I think he's gotten a little worse. And I've been a huge proponent of his from the get-go, less so now. But, yeah, I just against Florida, he missed some opportunities. And it's 2 things. One, he's not the runner I thought he would be. That's pretty obvious by now. I based a lot of that on what he did against Dodgers Bowl. I thought he was going to be a dynamic runner. You would want to use him sparingly as a runner, but when you used him, he could make big plays. He could convert a broken play into a big play, and he hasn't been able to do that. So that's one thing. The other thing, I thought in his first 3 games, his passing, he showed us every kind of pass. He can rocket the ball, great fastball, but he also has a really deft touch when need be. And he seemed to know when to throw which. So, but the last 3 games, I've seen him throw. It seems as though he's throwing harder and harder. And that might be a sign of pressure, perhaps pressure from the rush, pressure from a tight game, that type thing.
So, John, I was going to go to that. How much do you think Nico's issue is that, and I'm with you, I was a side. I mean, I literally said Nico Iamaleava was created in a lab to play in Josh Heupel's system. But how... so it doesn't look like
well,
it now.
Just seems kind of funny now. And Joe Milton was created in the same lab, right? No, go ahead.
Yeah, and so my question is, though, how much of this does fall on the tackles? I mean, I most of the time when quarterbacks struggle, the offensive line is the first to be blamed, and I think a lot of times quarterbacks can overcome that. But Nico is a freshman, and this is the worst offensive tackle play I've witnessed at Tennessee in a long time. So how much of that falls on he's just seeing ghosts now?
John, it might be ever for me. That's 25 years.
You think the tackles are that bad?
I think they're that bad.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, I watch him. It really, when you watch if you record the game and then watch it a second time, that's when it really sticks out. Oops, here they come. Yeah, I think that's a big factor. But Caleb, you go back to the first 3 games when he wasn't really pressured, and he did well. So that's certainly a factor. But what I was expecting from him was something more. And I always use that. I bring up guys like Johnny Manziel because they just make plays no matter what. They just find a way. And that was just it wasn't a hope. I just kind of thought that might be what Nico will be. But I'm not seeing that. I mean, he's at the opposite end of the spectrum, don't you think? Because when those guys come crashing past those tackles, he's not only failing to elude them, he's also not protecting the ball. And so that's an issue too.
Well, that's a big one. And I think if we were sitting here having this conversation that he had just played average and hadn't thrown into coverage a couple of times last week and against NC State, I realize a strip sack is partly on the offensive lineman, but he's had other fumbles as well. If I wanted to go back to that Oklahoma game, but he's had other issues. He had a fumble against Florida. So how different is the narrative and it's a big if, but if you take those turnovers out and he's the 8th most efficient quarterback in the SEC, which he currently is. That would improve by not throwing interceptions, but just across the board, how different would the narrative be if not for the turnovers?
The narrative would be different, and then you would look at Tennessee as truly a team that is trying to win with defense, a running game. Dylan Sampson's one of the top running backs, not just in the SEC, but in the country. And with a quarterback who's those dreaded words, kind of a game manager, if he's efficient and doesn't turn it over, that's not what you expected to see. But yeah, that would definitely be an improvement.
John, how much of this are numbers misleading? Our stat of the day, and I brought it up last segment. You may not know this, but basically Nico pretty much leads any freshman quarterback to ever start at Tennessee in every single statistical category possible.
Let's just go ahead and get it out there. Caleb said that this is the best. Nico's the best freshman quarterback that Tennessee's ever had.
He's having the best freshman season statistically ever, and that's not disputable. And I mean efficiency wise too. Highest quarterback rating, highest completion percentage, highest yards per attempt. Are we being a little hard on him, or is that to be expected? Should it be better because of this era and this offense?
No, I don't think we're being too hard on him. I mean, yeah, he was better statistically than Peyton Manning. And he played a lot as a true freshman. I guess the last half of the season, he was the number one quarterback and kept getting better. But no, this is a little bit different. And keep in mind, he's a redshirt freshman. Peyton was a true freshman. So that's a factor in it too. So much was expected of him. And Tennessee is the NIL money. We don't know exactly what it is, but the price tag usually is around $2 million a year, which really isn't out of line with what the top quarterback recruits are getting. So yeah, I mean, more is expected of him certainly than any freshman quarterback. But my gosh, you look at those first 3 games and you look at Heupel's system, and we've noticed this not just for quarterbacks. Heupel's offense against bad teams really piles up numbers that can skewer sacks. I mean, stats. You just think about it. Kent State's the worst team in the country. Let me down against Ball State, though, by 53-yard touchdown pass on 40 seconds to go to beat the spread, not win the game. It's unfortunate for all the people to whom I recommended Kent as a sure thing, not just this Saturday, but every Saturday. Just go ahead and bet all their games.
I've been doing that same thing, by the way.
Yeah. Well, see, but unlike you, Caleb, unlike you, John doesn't bet his own money. He just tells people to do it.
Yeah. Sort of voyeuristic there. Yeah. Well, go. Yeah. You can't lose with that. Good luck to you. Hey, you made the decision. Don't blame me. You pull the trigger on that one. Yeah. And then NC State. We talked about this last week. I mean, how bad is NC State? It's I think is it 3-4 or 3-3, but it easily could have lost a couple of games to Western Carolina. So, and of course an FCS opponent in Chattanooga. So that really changes how the stats should be viewed. You look at his SEC stats.
Yeah, no, I agree. And he's still only 8 of 14, I believe, because Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers have split time. So they don't have enough attempts to qualify. So he's like bottom half of the SEC right now based off quarterbacks that have thrown enough passes to qualify. So I want to ask you this, John. It is also our poll question if people want to take part. I'm most concerned about Nico's running ability, comprehension, arm, or unfair expectations. John's appearance is brought to you by Newbert Collision Center.
35th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Newbert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that. If we wouldn't put our family in it, we're not going to put their family in it. If you're going to say that you're doing the best work in Knoxville, now saying it's one thing, producing it and providing it's another.
The largest family-owned collision center in Knoxville is Joe Newbert Collision Center.
John, most concerned about Nico's running ability, comprehension, arm, unfair expectations.
Certainly, there's no question about his arm. He makes throws guys in the NFL don't make. You can watch a lot of guys Sunday and not see his highlight reel any better than his.
Can I interrupt you for a second on that?
Uh-huh.
Do you still think that from an accuracy standpoint, after he overthrew a couple of guys deep, and I thought the Chris Brazel, Caleb and I debated this, but I thought the Chris Brazel throw had to be more inbounds. He ended up catching it out of bounds. So for me, the first time that I questioned his accuracy was Saturday against Florida.
Yeah, and see, to me, that I think of a bigger issue. I think of how he performs under pressure, because the throwing ability he had in the first few games when he wasn't under pressure, not just the pressure of a pass rush, but the pressure of a tight game. We're seeing a different kind of player. We're not seeing somebody that raises their game amid adversity. Part of that might be his lack of experience, whatever. But you've seen them too, guys that are immediate, that they show that quality right away. They may be lacking in other areas, but they have an ability to raise their game in tight situations. I thought DJ Lagway, a true freshman, that was a tremendous pass he made to tie that Tennessee game and send it into overtime.
It is funny you bring that up, because that would have been the exact type of play I expected out of Nico.
Yeah. Agreed.
I mean, is that unfair to expect that, the presence to step up in the pocket and zip a ball to a guy that's pretty open?
No, I mean that is what you
No.
expect, but I think that's where Nico's demons came to hit. Look, John, I know what you bring up about Peyton Manning, but the reason I wanted to bring up those numbers is I can't remember a freshman quarterback getting hit as much as Nico Iamaleava has been at Tennessee. And what I mean by that is, when Peyton Manning was at Tennessee, I think you had some of the best offensive linemen in history at that time starting at Tennessee. Casey Clausen, not much different. I mean, had a pretty elite offensive line that year. It wasn't as good as Peyton's. Peyton had massive linemen. Eric Ainge had a really good line in 2004. I can't remember a freshman quarterback starting at Tennessee like this, starting at the beginning of the season, so they had to play the gauntlet of some of the tougher games, and getting hit the way Nico's been getting hit. And I think that's where I just think he's seeing ghost at this point.
John?
Well, sometimes those ghosts don't go away for quarterbacks when they have a tough introduction. I've seen other young quarterbacks in the SEC get hit some too. South Carolina's, Lagway at Florida. But they're still bouncing back and making plays. I guess maybe my expectations are just too high for Nico. Maybe I just thought he was going to be so much better than he is, and that's unfair to him. If you want to look at it from that perspective, that this guy just wasn't quite whom we thought he was.